Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You're watching NBC News Now.
Today, on this hot day, this is a hot verdict for us that we will forever cherish.
That's right.
Because we got one of the greatest, or the greatest entertainer alive today. Mr. Bill Cosby, this great American citizen, this American treasure, this icon.
That's right.
Bill Cosby is a free man. Cosby's team talking for the first time since he was released from prison this afternoon. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court vacating his sexual assault conviction today. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson joining me now. So, Ann, walk us through the PA Supreme Court's decision today. Why did they overturn Cosby's conviction?
Allison, they made their decision not based on the facts of the case. They made their decision because of an agreement that was made years ago, back in 2005, when Andrea Constand first accused Bill Cosby of sexually assaulting her at his Pennsylvania home. And she said this happened in January of 2004. She went to the police in 2005. The Montgomery County District Attorney Bruce Castor looked at the case, didn't think he could win it. So he entered an agreement with Bill Cosby that said, look, I'm not going to prosecute you criminally for this case, but in an effort to give Andrea Constand a measure of justice, he thought she would be best off pursuing this pursuing a civil lawsuit. And because of that, because Bill Cosby wouldn't be ever prosecuted criminally, he could testify in the civil suit about what happened. And he would do it without protection of his Fifth Amendment rights. And that's exactly what happened. The big problem came in 2015 when a new district attorney took office and said, hey, why aren't we prosecuting Bill Cosby, and made the decision to go ahead. And then there was there were two trials. The first trial ended in a deadlock jury. The second trial ended in the conviction that sent Bill Cosby to prison for 3 to 10 years. He served more than 2, but he was released today because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, look, that decision that was made back in 2005 and then the trial that happened just a few years ago violated the decision that was made all that time ago and violated the due process because the deposition was used against Mr. Cosby in the trial that put him in jail. So they not only threw out the conviction, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, look, you cannot retry Bill Cosby. This is done. This is over. As far as the criminal charges involving Andrea Constand, they're done.
So just to be very clear, so our viewers understand, this decision means Cosby cannot be retried in this case. But there are still some questions about whether this is truly the end of his legal battles.
Right. And that depends on the statute of limitations involving all those other cases, because what had happened between 2005 when the agreement was made and when the new district attorneys took over, there's about a 10-year period. Lots of other women had come forward and said, hey, Bill Cosby, sexually assaulted me. He drugged me and then took advantage of me when I fell asleep and I was defenseless. Now, remind you that Bill Cosby has always said that that didn't happen, that the sexual encounters were always consensual.
And you mentioned this. He walked free today after serving a few years of a 10-year sentence. Are there any terms of his release, or is he a completely free man?
As far as we know, Allison, he is a completely free man. And I wanted to read a statement that came from the district attorney, Kevin Steele, who said, and this is, I think, the real key part. He said he was found guilty by a jury, referring to Bill Cosby, and now goes free on a procedural issue that is irrelevant to the facts of the case. I want to commend Cosby's victim, Andrea Constand, for her bravery in coming forward and remaining steadfast throughout this long ordeal, as well as all of the other women who have shared similar experiences. But of course, one of the fears now is, will women come forward? Remember when Cosby was convicted, there was sort of this great relief. It's like, oh, at long last, we are finally believed. And now, because of this secret agreement that was made, years before that conviction, Bill Cosby is now a free man.
could certainly be a deterrent for people who might have had the confidence to come forward previously. And thanks so much for all of your reporting today. We really appreciate it.
Take care, Allison.
Joining me now, former Cosby special prosecutor Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. Kristen, we are thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much for making the time. You were deeply involved in his conviction. I just have to get your reaction to the court's decision today.
You know, Allison, while I respect the judge's decision, their opinion on our esteemed court, I respectfully have to disagree with their findings. Obviously, as you mentioned, I was one of the prosecutors who believed that this alleged promise that Bruce Castor testified to the existence of did not exist. And so I'm surprised, I'm shocked, I'm disturbed. But again, I want to highlight exactly what Kevin Steele said. You know, that jury of Cosby's peers, of Andrea Constand's peers, still looked Cosby in the eye and said, guilty, guilty, guilty. And while that guilty conviction no longer stands, the factual finding behind it still stands. They still found that Cosby, after rendering Andrea Constand incapable of consent, sexually assaulted her. And so I hope that this decision, while distressing for survivors as a whole, both Cosby survivors and others, brings at least that to them understanding that though this was a technicality, there is still justice in the fact that that jury found him guilty.
Many of them may not be feeling that way today. What does this overturned conviction mean for his more than 50 accusers? I mean, maybe watching this thinking, well, it doesn't matter because he's out now.
You're right. And many of them are not feeling that justice was served here today. And I think the important thing to remember is that justice looks differently for many different individuals. But one of the things I want to highlight, Allison, being there for both trials and being there throughout the entirety of that 33-month ordeal or more, is that there was so much support, so much love and outpouring for Andrea Constand, for all of the survivors who testified as prior act witnesses. There was a community that was building. The Me Too movement was elevated. And all of those things, Cosby can't take that away. This 79-page opinion cannot take any of that away. And so I respect the fact that many people, including many of the survivors that I spoke to today, are feeling like this is a miscarriage of justice. And that is true. I'm not going to minimize that. But I do want to highlight that this man was found to have sexually assaulted Andrea Constand, and I hope that people can find relief in that.
I spoke with an attorney earlier today who said, look, this is the reality, that these kinds of deals, if you will, these kinds of agreements happen very often in the legal process, that prosecutors may say, I don't think I can get the outcome I'm looking for in a criminal case, so I may go the civil route. You're in the courtroom all the time. You have far more expertise and experience than any of us. How common are things like this? How often does this happen in the legal process? I mean, are there sort of backdoor deals going on all the time that really affect how justice is served?
Allison, that's a fantastic question. I think that the one thing I want to emphasize is I'm a civil attorney now. I used to be a prosecutor. As a prosecutor, you are a public servant. You represent that state or that county to make sure that any injustice, whether it be a crime against an individual or what have you, that individual, that community remains safe. And so if you make backdoor deals for an individual to obtain civil justice, I would arguably say that borders on potentially being unethical because it impairs your ability to be a public servant and look out for the community in of itself. Because if you make these backdoor deals, then you essentially are allowing an offender to go free. There could be new evidence uncovered later on down the road. And that's why, to be honest with you, I have never seen this type of agreement being made in the entirety of my legal career. With that said, the prosecutor and the civil attorney, sometimes they have the same goal. They want to get justice for that survivor, whether it be a sex crime survivor or other type of survivor of crime. But by no means does the prosecutor impair their ethical obligation to the community in order to cross that line into putting on the hat of a civil justice to obtain civil justice. I also want to just highlight that I don't believe that happened, though I do understand that our respected bench did find that fact to have existed. But I do want to highlight one thing that you kind of pointed at, and that's these agreements. Again, while I've never seen it to be a non-prosecution agreement trying to interfere with the civil justice realm, non-disclosure agreements in and of itself, as well as other non-prosecution agreements. We see even the NDAs, with Bill Gates and other things. These have historically been seen to impair or block a survivor's journey towards justice, and they need to be done away with. And that is one of the things I do want to highlight.
Bill Cosby released a statement earlier through a spokesperson, and this is what that statement said. This is justice for Black America. He was given a deal and he had immunity. He should have never been charged. Your reaction to that statement?
Again, I disagree that he was given immunity, but I think one of the most important things is, as I sit here before you as a Black female, I can't tell you how disgusted I am at that statement. Not only because it is not justice, not only because what he says, but I think one of the things that's important is throughout the entirety of that trial, he has exploited us as Black Americans, our thirst for justice in this country. And for him to say that he, a sexual predator accused not once, not twice, but over 60 times of drugging and raping women, that his conviction being overturned would be justice for Black America, especially after giving the pound cake speech, is disgusting. I also want to highlight for you, Allison, and I apologize because I'm getting animated, but I also want to highlight for you that this is not justice for Shalon Lasha, Lee Slott Lublin, or Kelly Johnson, 3 Black females who testified that they too had been drugged and sexually assaulted by Cosby at trials 1 and 2. And I'm sure it's not justice for Beverly Johnson and all the other Black women that he sexually assaulted. So I find that statement disgusting and reprehensible, but I'm not surprised because he's been exploiting Black Americans for at least the last decade.
Kristen, you are well known for your passion in the courtroom. Thank you so much for sharing some of it with us today. Really great to have you on. I know you're very busy today, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care, Allison.
You too. All right, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Great to see you, friend. So this decision came down to a prior agreement between Cosby and former prosecutor Bruce Castro, who agreed not to prosecute Cosby in exchange for his testimony in a civil trial. This deal is something we all just keep picking apart and talking about. What else should we know about it? How common these kinds of agreements are. I think we're all trying to understand if these are things that happen in our justice system, in courts, very often.
What you need to know is that this isn't a deal. It really isn't an agreement in the sense that we traditionally think about agreements. And that's what the lower court struggled with. Let me start with plea deals and agreements in general. They're made all the time. In fact, cooperating witnesses, snitches, these are people who enter into cooperation agreements where they make a deal with the prosecution. But anyone who's ever entered into one knows that everything about them is on the record. There's no ambiguity. These agreements are typed out. There is nothing left to chance when it comes to any kind of plea agreement or agreement not to prosecute, or really anything, especially in the federal context, where as somebody is looking at reduced charges in exchange for something. Contract principles apply to these agreements. And what you see in this case is something that you almost never see. And in fact, I really doubt that you could call it an agreement. In fact, the court used a principle in contract law called promissory estoppel, almost the exact same principle in civil law applied to this criminal case. And it's this: sometimes there isn't a contract. Sometimes for some reason, some element of a contract fails. So you don't technically have an agreement. But the law has said for centuries probably that even if the contract breaks down, if one party makes a promise to another party And it's reasonable that the other party, the defendant, Cosby in this case, would rely on that promise to his detriment. Then, in equity, in fairness, the promise should be enforced, even with understanding, and in fact, only when there is no underlying contract. Just the principles of fairness say that where somebody makes a promise or a guarantee and somebody else reasonably relies and it harms them, then courts will enforce that promise. It's a stunning application to the principles of plea agreements. But I will assure you that this is incredibly rare. Agreements with prosecutors, very common. In fact, they happen thousands of times a day, but they're on the record. Everybody knows the score. There usually isn't a lot of ambiguity because ambiguity invites litigation, and nobody wants more litigation, even us attorneys, than we have.
So, Danny, then I have to ask, I mean, given the ambiguity here and then also taking into account principles of fairness, do you agree with what the Supreme Court decided today? Was this the right decision?
I always thought this was going to be a valid, appealable issue. Not necessarily that Cosby would win, but just because, and I'm writing a column right now, if I can plug myself for NBC News Think.
Plug that
on
column,
this exact
sir.
issue. That this is, thank you, that this is exactly the issue that I thought, because it was so unusual. This is something that you just don't see in this fact scenario. You don't see a mega rich defendant. You never see a prosecutor really even think about the civil consequences of a case. Yes, I want to be clear. Prosecutors are concerned about restitution, which is a court order in the criminal case saying, hey, you stole this transistor radio, you owe the victim X amount of money. Prosecutors do care about that. But civil lawsuits outside of their arena of criminal prosecution, they don't normally care about that. That's really outside their purview. It's not in the world of criminal prosecution. So this is an unusual piece of justice. And when justice is unusually applied, it's not necessarily injustice, but it sure is different, whatever it is.
All right, Danny Savalos, thank you so much. We're going to allow you to plug your think piece, but transistor radios, come on, man, it's 2021.
I'm older. What can I say?
Great to have you with us. We'll look forward to the column.
I lost the best person in my life. You know, at least we haven't found her yet. Hopefully we didn't, really lose her.
Rachel Spiegel holding on to hope, waiting for news about her mother, Judy, who she says was home during the condo collapse in Surfside, Florida. Right now, 16 people are confirmed dead as that search and rescue mission continues for a 7th day. NBC News correspondent Allison Barber joining me now from Surfside. Allison, no one's been pulled out of that rubble alive since last Thursday. I understand more storms are rolling through there today. I know that crews are still calling it a search and rescue operation. But is there optimism, the incredible hope they've had, is that starting to wane?
I think for rescuers in particular, they've sort of been expecting and ready for whatever may come. I mean, this is not their first time dealing with something like this. For example, the Miami-Dade Urban Search and Rescue Team, they've been involved in some 9 different earthquakes, the most recent being Haiti. They've been to 5 different building collapses building explosions rather. Back in 2007, they went to help out in Barbados after a building collapse. So they are experienced. I think they are aware of the reality no matter what, but they, of course, always hope. And as the days go by, they say that it's becoming harder and harder to see how someone may be alive here. At least that's what we're being told by some of the rescuers on the ground today. For these rescuers, this is challenging logistically, tactically, physically, and also emotionally, because this is not just any disaster. This is their home, this is their community as well. I want you to listen to some of what we heard from one member of the Miami-Dade Urban Search and Rescue Team. Listen here.
We're always going to be hopeful. We're going to be hopeful until the very end that we can, by some miracle, we can find one person alive. That would just be the most amazing thing that we could ever find. Obviously, we understand that every day that goes by, that becomes a bigger challenge.
And Maggie, who you heard from there, told me that there is no timetable for how long this search could last. She said, obviously, their goal, their priority, they always want to find people alive, but she said they will keep going, removing every piece of debris, rubble from this site until they are able to give every family closure, regardless of what that looks like. Allison.
Allison, I know families have been providing DNA samples to help identify the victims. It almost feels intrusive to ask, but what is that process like? How long is it taking to get confirmation to those families? It just feels so deeply personal, and my heart breaks just thinking of the weight and what that is like for them.
Yeah, I mean, and it's worth remembering it like that, right? Because this is another aspect of what these families are going through, the devastation that they have to deal with, because not only are they worried, not only are they scared, not only are they trying to balance hope between reality, comfort each other, but they're also having to deal with what is unfortunately a very technical process. I mean, when they are reporting their loved ones missing, they were asked to give samples of their DNA. To be asked to do that, I mean, that's unfathomable for most of us to imagine ever having to do that, but that is what they are doing. And we know, as it relates to the Noriega family, Hilda Noriega, who is one of the confirmed victims, her family said that they were notified after they'd given their DNA sample, and that is how they were able to find out that they'd lost their loved one. The process, they're trying to do it as fast as possible, but it's not easy. It takes time with the rapid DNA test. Best case, they say it usually takes 24 hours. So again, another added layer to just the unimaginable emotions, difficulties these families are going through. Allison.
Allison, just all the different elements of heartbreak. I know Rachel, who we heard from there right before you spoke to us, was saying she's still getting Target packages in the mail that her mother had ordered for her. I can't imagine what it's even like for her to go and get her mail every day. Thank you to you for sharing these deeply personal stories and what these families are going through. It just absolutely tears your heart out. Appreciate all the hard work you're doing there.
Thanks.
The oppressive heat doing a number on our power grid as NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman reports we could be on our way to an energy crisis.
Rolling blackouts, scorching temperatures, lakes and rivers drying up. It's a perfect storm, one creating new threats to America's power grid, already stretched thin and now being pushed to the brink. As the western U.S. grapples with record heat and drought, the same conditions driving up our demand for electricity are limiting our ability to make it. As it turns out, just about every part of the electricity system performs worse when it's really hot and dry.
This is scary. I mean, you can call this unprecedented. And we've had two weather events in less than a year that we have never seen. We have never come close to seeing before.
In Portland, Oregon, temperatures hitting 116 degrees, an all-time high. The local power company had to install extra cooling systems to keep their own equipment from overheating. Those cooling systems themselves use electricity, just like the air conditioners that Oregonians are now buying up in droves.
Air conditioning numbers in this region are going to go up dramatically.
And that's going to increase the energy needs.
And that will again make the next peak even worse in terms of the electric demand on the system.
It's also about the water. Fuel-burning power plants like coal, natural gas, and even nuclear rely on water to cool everything off. The less water available nearby, the less power they can safely generate. A water shortage can even take power plants offline. So far, that's only happened rarely and temporarily, such as at Connecticut's Millstone Nuclear Power Station. But regulators are studying what to do if the problem gets worse.
Researchers have shown that drought threatens coal and nuclear power plant water supplies in the upper Midwest, in the southeastern United States, in New England, as well as the western United States. So this is really a national issue.
Then there's hydroelectric, dams that generate power from nature's own resources. Less water in rivers and reservoirs, less electricity.
Right now, it's particularly acute on the Colorado River. That drought is impacting the deliverability of generation, the hydropower generation.
Lake Mead on the Colorado River is the nation's largest reservoir by volume, the water source for the Hoover Dam, which provides power for 3 states. This week, water levels in Lake Mead at a record low of less than 1,070 feet. This time last year, it was 18 feet higher. The Bureau of Reclamation says that's already reduced the Hoover Dam's output by more than a quarter. That's the drought. Then there's the heat. A study from the Energy Department's Argonne National Laboratory found that during heat wave conditions, transmission lines carry power less efficiently. Gas-fired plants don't work as well. Even solar panels produce less electricity during intense heat.
Extreme weather is also impacting us with respect to wildfire danger. Right now and throughout the last week, we've had wildfires coming perilously close to our transmission lines, carrying that federal hydropower to customers.
Just look at California. In recent years, the largest utility has forced blackouts preemptively because the extreme heat and transmission lines threatened a deadly combination, especially during wildfire season.
And as climate change induces extreme weather events more and more frequently, we need to make investments to build a more resilient grid.
We know the future means more reliance on electricity. That's by design. But all that electricity has to come from somewhere. And when renewable sources like hydro and solar aren't enough, the backup tends to be the dirtiest options. Old coal and gas plants, or even oil-burning emergency generators, fueling even more greenhouse gas emissions. And a vicious cycle that will test the power grid more and more often, and at the times we need it most.
Josh is here with me now. So, Josh, what can we do to help relieve the pressure on our energy systems? I'm sitting here feeling guilty. I'm blasting my air conditioning. I got a fan going. Are there ways the average American can make a difference here, short and long term?
Well, don't feel bad, Allison. It is hot out there. You do need that air conditioning, but there are absolutely things that we can and will be expected to do as Americans to deal with this. Some of it has to do with making sure that our homes and our businesses are more efficient, that they use less electricity. Sometimes it will be about making sure we don't use more electricity than we need to, that we conserve energy. And then another big part is going to be making sure that we are sharing, that we're playing nicely in the sandbox so that when one part of the country is facing a shortage, other parts can get it from that part, and even have our electric vehicles in the future sell back electricity to the grid during peak hours so that we're not overloading the systems all at once.
So today, Josh, President Biden met with governors from the West to talk about wildfire season, to talk about the impact that heat and drought are having on this country. What was his message for them? Because, you know, we've just are all feeling the heat, whether it's using all this energy and electricity or concerned that there's going to be a terrible wildfire season ahead.
Well, President Biden's message has been, look, a lot of this is coming whether we like it or not. And now is the time for states to work on resilience, to make sure that they are prepared. To that end, he's inviting states to apply for federal grants for money to do what they call pre-disaster mitigation. And the other part of this is preparing for wildfires as we enter wildfire season. The president very upset that federal firefighters now make about $13 an hour. He's pledging that in his administration, they are going to start to make $15 an hour as we try to improve recruitment and retention of firefighters, Allison.
All right, Josh, very much appreciate your reporting today. Thank you. The House voting to create a select committee to investigate the January 6th Capitol riot, but we don't know all that much about it. House leaders have been saying very little about who they'll put on this panel. NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor joining me now. So, Sahil, Speaker Pelosi picks 8 members for this committee. Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy picks 5 in consultation with Pelosi. Any insight on who those names might be who could sit on this panel?
Yeah, firstly, Allison, that's a key point that it's a consultation. So Speaker Pelosi gets 8 appointments of her own. Nobody has the ability to stop her. Kevin McCarthy gets to recommend 5 names, but Pelosi does not have to accept them. So if he tries to put someone like a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Paul Gosar on this panel, you might see Pelosi have other ideas on that. Now, as for names, we don't have an announcement yet. The Speaker has said only that the names will come after the creation of this panel. It's the vote passed, just a couple of hours ago, and we don't yet have names. But one person who's been floated by her third in command, Jim Clyburn, is Benny Thompson, the Democratic chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. On the Republican side, the speaker has said she is seriously considering, or rather her office has said she is seriously considering appointing a Republican. I caught up with Congresswoman Liz Cheney, one of the 2 Republicans who voted for this panel, and asked her if she'd be open to serving. She said it's up to the speaker. So clearly she's open to that. I would keep my eyes on her and Adam Kinzinger as a potential Republican appointee for Speaker Pelosi in this. With regards to Kevin McCarthy, it's far from clear who he's going to recommend at this moment.
Sahil, Democrats will have the majority and Republicans calling this a partisan move, but this wasn't the Democrats' first choice. Senate Republicans filibustered the Dems' original proposal for an independent 9/11 style commission. So what are you hearing from your sources and lawmakers about how the Republicans may play this going forward? Will they attempt to cooperate or make this one tough for the Democrats to get anything done?
I think we're going to go on and on and on this merry-go-round for the next several months until the end of this panel, where Republicans say, oh, this is just a partisan effort. What are you doing? And Democrats will say, well, you forced us to do this by blocking the independent commission that was evenly divided between the 2 parties. So we're just going to hear a lot of that for the duration of this committee. And they don't, by the way, have a deadline. The independent commission that passed the House and got filibustered by Senate Republicans set a deadline at the end of this year to come up with a report. This committee does not have a deadline, so it's possible that this could extend on into the year 2022, which is an election year, of course.
All right, we'll see how long it drags on and how productive they're able to be. Sahil, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you.
You could call it ranked choice round 2. The New York City Board of Elections releasing new unofficial voting results in the Democratic mayoral primary today. Yesterday, an error sent that primary into chaos, forcing officials to remove preliminary numbers from the elections website. So what happened? Well, the Board of Elections counted about 135,000 test ballots by mistake. Ranked Choice is brand new in New York City, and apparently they are still working out the kinks. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns is outside Brooklyn Borough Hall with the latest on this one. And Dasha, you have some exclusive new reporting about the Board of Elections refusing help here. So what's going on?
Hey, Allison, yeah, there are several layers here. It's a little bit complicated. But what's important to note is that what we saw transpire over the last 24 hours didn't have a whole lot to do with ranked choice voting as a system. What it did have to do with is human error and a lack of safeguards to protect against that human error, according to the elections experts that I've been speaking with. And what our new reporting shows is that the New York City Board of Elections actually had an offer to create some of those safeguards, some of those mechanisms that they did not accept. And that offer actually came from the very group that manages the software that the city is using to run these tabulations. The Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, their president told me that they offered many times over via email, via phone call, even a visit in person to provide education and training and to also provide a parallel tabulation and blind review that would have prevented this kind of mistake. They are experts in this. They've helped out in multiple elections like this across the country. And the consensus that I'm hearing from experts is that they say that New York City, the Board of Elections, just didn't have those mechanisms in place, the redundancies that are so critical to elections to check their work before they release these results. I want you to hear from Rob Ritchie. He's a president of Fair Vote, a nonprofit, nonpartisan election reform organization. He works with a lot of these groups. Take a listen to his perspective on this.
It's a rookie mistake. It's not something that a professional operation should do. I think the Board of Elections has done some good things in this cycle. They're dealing with a lot of new rules in New York, but this was a rookie mistake that should have been avoided. Board of Elections had an offer on the table that would have created safeguards to avoid all the problems we saw yesterday or make them much less likely, and never responded to that offer.
Allison, we reached out for comment from the Board of Elections about this, and they responded saying that software was not the issue. It was human error, that the cast vote record was included and should not have been. But again, the offer that was provided to the Board of Elections from this organization that runs and manages their software was to create some of those safeguards for human error. Allison.
Dasha, Mayor Bill de Blasio is not in this race, but he's not happy about all this. What's he saying?
Mayor de Blasio echoing some of the sentiments we've heard from a lot of New Yorkers, criticizing some of the long-standing and pretty well-known in the city here problems with the Board of Elections. He said that yet again, the fundamental structural flaws of the Board of Elections are on display. There must be an immediate, complete recanvass of the Board of Elections vote count and a clear explanation of what went wrong. The record number of voters who turned out this election deserve nothing less. And going forward, there must be a complete structural rebuild of the board. Again, echoing some of the sentiments we've heard from other elected officials, including the Senate majority here in New York State, also calling this a national embarrassment. There will be a lot of eyes on this going forward, Allison.
Dasha, ballot counting elections have never been under a greater microscope in the U.S. than they are these days. So what are you hearing from the candidates? I can imagine they're a little rattled by all this. Are they confident at all in the ranked choice results?
Yeah, Allison, it's hard to ignore the fact that this is coming against a backdrop of a lot of national controversy around elections and former President Trump continuing to falsely claim voter fraud. He actually put out a statement using this as another piece of his continued false claims. And I want you to hear, though, from Catherine Garcia about her take on what's going on. Take a listen.
We will not know for a while what exactly happened, but it seems like it was just a mistake. Someone forgot to clear the computer before they put the real data in. I'm concerned that it undermines people's confidence. There's no one on my team or where we've been doing observations of opening of ballots that gives us concern that there's something fraudulent happening at all. But we need to make sure that the vote is protected and that we get the result that New Yorkers went to the polls or mailed in at the end of the day.
The Adams campaign also just put out a statement saying that today we petition the court to preserve our right to a fair election process and have a judge oversee and review ballots if necessary. We're notifying the other campaigns of our lawsuit through personal service as required by law. There is going to be a lot of continued fallout from this. This is a consequential mistake and a consequential election, Allison.
Oh, no doubt, Dasha. And you know, New Yorkers don't let anything go. We'll have lots of questions about this one until we get all of the answers. Nope. Thanks a million for your reporting today.
That's exactly right. Thanks.
To mask or not to mask? The Delta variant raising that question once again. The highly contagious COVID strain prompting health officials to issue new safety guidance. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almagar has more.
Allison, by the fall, the Delta variant's expected to be the most dominant variant here in the U.S., and now there's some big changes underway in L.A. County.
The dangerous Delta COVID variant renewing the debate over face masks.
It's definitely been kind of chaotic, and there's not really strict guidance.
I think it should be your choice if you want to wear a mask or not.
L.A. County is urging everyone to keep wearing masks inside public places like grocery stores and movie theaters, whether you're vaccinated or not. The county's public health agency saying until we better understand how and to who the Delta variant is spreading, everyone should focus on maximum protection. That messaging in line with the World Health Organization, which continues to recommend face masks and social distancing indoors. Lester with Dr. Fauci.
Do you expect the CDC to change its mask-wearing guidelines for vaccinated Americans?
No, Lester, I don't. We know from experience now that the vaccines that we're using in this country do very well against the Delta variant.
Moderna announcing a new lab study found its vaccine shows promise in protecting against virus variants, including Delta. Still ahead of the busy 4th of July weekend, many are encouraging caution.
You should just bring your mask with you and keep safe.
The new concern's especially tough for parents with kids too young to get a shot.
It's the pros and cons. Do you want to get out and socialize? Just like a constant double-edged sword to me.
Another debate among doctors, should Americans vaccinated with Johnson & Johnson consider getting a booster shot? There are multiple clinical trials in the U.S. on booster shots with various combinations of the existing vaccines, but some doctors are already adding a shot of another vaccine to J&J. Dr. Angela Rasmussen, a virologist, initially got the J&J shot, but recently took a dose of Pfizer.
I thought that it was wise to err on the side of having as much protection as possible.
Still, she touts the overall effectiveness of the vaccines.
The J&J vaccine does provide full vaccination. That is, they need to keep you from getting really sick. They need to keep you out of the hospital, and they need to keep you from dying.
Today, Johnson & Johnson says its vaccine is safe and effective, and there is no need for a booster. But of course, scientists are still studying that.
All right, let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Great to see you, Dr. Patel. Los Angeles County now encouraging masks, even if you're vaccinated. But the CDC has not changed its guidance. Here's what Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky said on the Today Show earlier.
There are areas of this country where about a third of people are vaccinated. They have low vaccination rates. And there are areas that have more disease, that are have more disease in the context of people not being vaccinated. So in those areas, we have always said, please look, make suggestions. But those masking policies are not to protect the vaccinated. They're to protect the unvaccinated.
Dr. Patel, I just had this conversation with my mom yesterday. She's nervous about the Delta variant. She wants to know she should wear a mask inside. And I said, Mom, that's not the guidance. When it is, or when our doctors tell us we should, I'll tell you. So Dr. Patel asking for my mom, what should we do here?
Allison, your mom's talking to my mom. I get the same questions all day. So here's how to think about it. Here's how to think about it. Moms included, me included, you included. If you're vaccinated, our current 3 vaccines hold up against the Delta variant. We don't have the data on J&J, as you mentioned in the package, but it does look and appear that it should hold up against the Delta variant. If you're in a setting where you know that the others around you are majority vaccinated, so if your mom's with you, you're vaccinated, she's vaccinated, the majority of people are vaccinated, you are protected. I think Dr. Walensky is correct, though, and I just want to make a point that where you have risk is if you're vaccinated and you're in an area where you don't know if people are vaccinated or not, we know that you could have a risk of a breakthrough infection. Allison, it's very small, but we don't know with Delta variant, we have a Delta Plus variant and other variants. Could that small breakthrough risk give infections to unvaccinated people? And so for those reasons, I say be confident in your individual vaccine, but be safe when you go into crowds. And then let me just end with like one thing that I will say. Individualism does not end a pandemic. One of the other reasons to take caution in unknown settings, Allison, is because by breaking chains of transmission, even amongst unvaccinated people, we are able to decrease cases. So vaccinated people and unvaccinated people wearing masks helps to just bring the activity level down to 0. But as an individual, your mom is safe, especially if others around her are vaccinated.
Well, Dr. Patel, I thank you. I know she's going to text me any minute now, and thank you as well. So I'm thanking you on her behalf. We are heading into the 4th of July weekend. Every time we've had a holiday throughout this pandemic, we've seen a spike in cases. Do you expect that to happen now, or is it a little different now that so many people are vaccinated?
Yeah, I think that where it is true that we will see a spike, we are seeing spikes, Allison, in parts of the country where we do have those lower vaccination rates. Going to play out very regionally, very locally. And so if you are in a community and the neighborhood has about a 60% vaccination rate, 4th of July event, because it's not just about being outdoors. Outdoors is safe, Allison, but I got to get in a car. I got to get into lines. I got to get into crowds in order to get to those outdoor events. That becomes the risk. And let me just offer one sobering statistic. There have been studies from Europe and other countries that show that the airborne Delta kind of strain of the coronavirus can actually infect in as low as 5 minutes. So, we had been saying 15 minutes close contact. That might not be true. Yeah. So I don't want to scare the public. Again, be confident. If you're vaccinated, be confident at the individual level, but be safe at the population and at the community level. We can't afford to do less right now. We're in the stretch. We really should stay safe by being confident, but also using our common sense.
It is important information we have. Thank you so much, Dr. Patel, and thank you always for your wise advice. Facebook Messenger reviving an 8-year-old college rape case. Shannon Keeler's alleged rapist sending her a flurry of Facebook messages confessing to sexually assaulting her at Gettysburg College. NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez spoke with Shannon back in May about her years-long battle. And just a warning, what you're about to hear may be disturbing.
I heard a knock, not even 2 minutes later. Not for a second did I think it was anyone other than my friend Kelsey trying to steal some pizza from my fridge. And when I opened it, it was him, and he wouldn't leave. And I texted my friends to come help me, and then he raped me, and then he started crying after and said, "Did I hurt you? Like, I didn't mean to hurt you." And then he ran back.
The Adams County DA's office decided they wouldn't be filing charges, and police closed the case. Last year, Shannon learned that her rape kit had been destroyed. Police confirmed this to us, saying it had been done legally 2 years after the case had been closed.
The system failed me, and by the time they even told me that they weren't prosecuting, it was too late to even file civil charges.
But then came the Facebook messages.
I handed my boyfriend my phone, and I'm like, he messaged me, and I was in such shock that I wasn't even able to actually read the messages. There was a bunch of them, and then he goes, "Shannon, he confessed." I immediately that night, it was the last day in May last year, that I took a screenshot of them all and sent them to the DA's office and titled that email, "Is this enough evidence?" ?
Isa joins me now. Isa, this is just an unbelievable story. So what's the latest here? Have authorities tracked down Shannon's alleged rapist? Where is this right now?
Allison, the DA's office handling this case in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, confirmed for us today that they have now filed sexual assault charges against a man by the name of Ian Cleary. They say that Cleary is 28 years old and from Saratoga, California. They also told me that authorities are currently trying to locate Cleary and have not been able to find him yet. They're asking that anyone who's aware of his whereabouts, please reach out to Gettysburg Borough Police Department. Now, we did reach out to Cleary ourselves and did not hear back. It's unclear at this point whether or not he has legal representation. But again, remember, Shannon has been trying to get local police and the DA for years now, almost 8 years, to act on this case. She had lost all hope until she received these messages last year, and this has been a really big week for her. Allison?
Yeah, absolutely. Isa, have you spoken to her? How is she reacting to all this?
Allison, we did get a statement from Shannon. It reads in part, "While I am moved to tears by this result, which I have waited for over 7 years, I'm mindful that this moment came because I went public with my story, which no survivor should have to do in order to obtain justice." Shannon is referring to the fact that she turned in those messages last year and went to the media last month to share her story. I do want to mention that when I spoke to police last month, they did confirm for me that they had received those messages and that they investigated to make sure that those messages were real and in fact from Mr. Cleary. We also spoke to Shannon's lawyer this morning. Take a listen.
Our hope is that Ian Cleary will take a plea deal and will spare her and her family that experience. But if need be, she is prepared. She's ready to move forward. And that says a lot about her inner strength. But like many survivors, we're hopeful that she has opportunity to heal. It's very rare to see campus sexual assaults prosecuted. And I'm hopeful that Shannon's case is not a one-off. I'm hoping that it will encourage prosecutors nationwide, law enforcement nationwide, to take on these cases. We need to stop rape on campus.
We'll keep you updated on this story as we learn more. Allison?
Issa, really powerful reporting. What a story. Thank you so much.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.